At the end of last year, I was finally able to get my hands on some cyberpunk bartending action, and promptly kicked myself for not getting to it earlier. Va-11 was the first of its kind that I played to the end, and what a ride that was. The stylish art putting each patron's life onto their face and clothes, bare for all to see. The witty, engaging dialogue that caught me both in laughter and solemn silence. It was an experience that truly embodied what one could call a visual novel. The themes running deep in this story's roots were already poignant when I first played it, but given a few months in this new world, and all of a sudden the messages took on a whole new level of meaning. Even though Glitch City itself doesn't exist, with denizens living lives so rich and varied, the common thread of existing in a society that didn't give much hope was comforting in its own right. Playing as Jill, mixing those colorful drinks, and reading their little blurbs of trivia had its own little mundane charm, but hearing all the woes and joys of each customer gave perspective into her own struggles. Sorting through a mountain of orders to pay for the onslaught of bills while handling out-of-touch clients, or out-of-sanity ones, has the nice, relatable ring to it. But it also gave me a great sense of the life Jill was living and who she was. Within the 2 sets of walls I stayed in during the game, her boring obligations became my own, and the big goal that I was panicking to complete was paying for her porn subscription. There's no sword or tome of wisdom this hero must receive. Her path, for the most part, runs in a loop, and yet this is where the game opened up to its widest and brightest part. Forget saving the world. It was clear enough surviving this hellhole was taking a lot of people everything they had, not to mention the tinges of personal tragedy each person carried. How easy you learned about them depended on the customer, but they were all looking for a place to rest their tired bodies, and maybe find an ear willing to listen. From this point on, I'll be delving into spoilers, so I apologize, but I don't know how to really talk about this game without cracking open the story. Seeing how Jill was the protagonist, the player's perspective and focus naturally anchors around her experiences, which is what made the news of her ex-girlfriend Lenore passing away that much more shocking. Having the privilege of reading her mind, we know that she wasn't exactly the aloof, cool-headed bartender the official art makes her out to be. Still, seeing her position as an informal confidant, her own pieces of advice that she gave out, put her in a position of trust and security, however small it was, compared to the reality of their world. So when that position shifted dramatically, and Jill, to put it plainly, breaks down at the news, delivered by the little sister of the person she loved no less, it became clear to me that every single character in this game is an imperfect being that can offer an incomplete view, no matter how much you could strive to open it, and that's 100% okay. It was those very weaknesses that made Jill such a strong main character, one you could empathize with for being her, not as an insert for the player. In the days after finding out about Lenore, work still calls, and the clients don't change one bit. How could they? They have their own lives after all. To say that she was handling it well would be disingenuous, but the genuine attempt in facing her past was strengthened by her effort to keep at her work. Of course, the friends both new and newish she made during her time at Valhalla gave the warm supporting push she needed, whether it was a walk home during riots, a night of hugs from an android sex worker, or just a person that could listen to her own problems. That's what made the talk with Alma in the days following the news so powerful. Jill was already on her way to picking herself up, but was able to take the hand reaching out. So the moment the player sees Jill pulled out from behind the counter and put quite literally on the hot seat by Alma, it sealed it for me that this game was something special. Now her face in full view, drink in hand, she too began to speak. About her past, about Lenore. Bright, daring, and most importantly the light of her life. Their time together, in both the brighter and darker moments. The fear of watching her life happen without her. Her unfortunate fight that ended up leaving her unable to say goodbye. The sighs and moments of silence speaking as much as her words. This was Julianne Stingley. As flawed as she was, the one word I felt Jill embodied the best was stoic. Even if it doesn't seem to match up to the textbook definition of being stone-faced, I'd say she's coping with the world in her own way. Stoicism makes the rounds for that very reason, by giving a rough set of ideas that can guide your perceptions of the world, and therefore actions within it. The core of its ideas, and by extent practice, is, if you were to live according to nature as it sees it, you'd find a virtuous life waiting. Now, one mistake people make in characterizing this philosophy is that emotions must be eliminated to follow this nature. From what I've gathered, emotions are but another part of your living experience. Their presence, in of itself, isn't detrimental to the practice of stoicism. The key is to not attach any judgment of value to them, since it won't ultimately help in living your best life. emotions included. So what do you do with them? Feel them. Feel them all, and take it on if it'll help in your journey. That's what Jill pretty much is by the end of the game. Is she a little anxious? Of course. But she's also ready to take on the uncertainty of the world. This time, she's able to lean on the shoulders around her, and in turn, offer one as well. How the game fleshed out the infinite web of personal connections that is Glitch City made the theme of finding yourself through others such a fun and revealing experience. The amount of work that went into each patron that walked through those doors left me in awe. I would have no clue how each conversation would go since there wasn't a real point to them. But thanks to that, the interactions were more natural and fun to read through. As Jill and her customer, or customers, circled around whatever small topic that came up in the beginning, it could open up unexpectedly into something new about the characters, from small, incidental tidbits, all the way to deep, private life stories. And what I would learn wasn't split up by who could be seen as favorable. This depth applied to everyone equally, even to her closer friends. I could have found them absolutely terrible, but still recognize them as a person. Inversely, even my most favorite characters had deep flaws, or opinions where I disagreed. The point is, these weren't people I could meet on the street. I already know them. To name a few that stood out to me in particular. First, Virgilio, the renowned curator of cleaning supplies at the Steampunk Museum. When I first met him, I thought his nonsense ordering and pseudo-intellectual speak and arrogance fell a little flat compared to the more wacky and tougher characters before. His ramblings made for some nice screenshot fodder though. It wasn't until a second meeting that I realized it might have been a mask, and it was slipping. The usual zeal and vigor gave way to a much more somber and straightforward man. Now the turn of personality could have just been intimidation, but hearing Say's story really broke it wide open. Turns out, he was actually the guardian angel of Say and Stella against the vicious attacker that took them hostage. Unfortunately, that was his superior, since he was working as a white knight then. Even sadder, they instantly left Stella with her prosthetic eye and Say a hospital stay. But what he did stayed with them until now. Even if it was one person, that one person risked his life and livelihood to protect those who couldn't do it themselves. Even if it cost him his position and safety. He did it expecting no reward in return because that was what he wanted. Hearing all that made me want to raise a glass to his name. A lot more going on than I thought. That's going to be the running theme for this game. Side note, he also makes a mean plate of curry. I'd like to try it myself. Talking about people having your back, I gotta mention Dana, the proprietor of this humble little watering hole, and your boss. Even if she's got a few screws loose, it's clear her employees' safety and happiness comes first. There's quite a bit that we, Jill included, don't know about her however, given the amount of time and chances she's had to interact with her. Though talking with her may create more mysteries in the end. For things we do know, she used to be on the force, and did a pretty damn good job, had a pro wrestling stint under the alias Red Comet, and most importantly, loves some good buffalo wings. As one consumer of chicken to another, I commend her tastes. Hopefully you guys can see the rambling about chicken was an ingenious segue to Dana's character. That's because for the most part, what Jill knows about her boss are icebreakers. Interesting as hell, but icebreakers still. The attempts Jill does make to crack that confident core veneer don't make it that far. Well, thanks to some good old civil unrest, a chance finally appears. Dana ends up walking Jill home for her protection, and the two end up sharing a few beers and stories together on her balcony. Even if she seemed more laid back, Dana still kept the airs of authority, making this chance to truly sit side to side with her much appreciated. The past makes its way forward for both Jill and Dana, as the cans pile up behind them. It's clear from the 17 years of life she's had on this earth, the amount of hats she's worn up to now has shaped who she is now. Yeah, there could have been skills she actually picked up from these jobs, but the most important part of it was how she started in the first place. I'm sure needing to eat was a motivator, but Dana did just fine without following some fabled school-to-job escalator of prosperity. Curiosity and the drive to learn isn't bound to any textbook. It's in every single person. That's the start to a fulfilling life, even if that start may lead to sticking some random stuff on your head. Finally, the last person I'd like to talk about is someone who seemed very close to Jill at a quick glance, but couldn't be living a life any more different from hers. Gillian, or Gil, is your fellow bartender at Valhalla, handling his own stream of unique customers. Of course, he's an interesting one himself. A little tense, which is something Dana and Jill both tease, but knows how to get the job done just fine. More importantly, he is the sole reason the restrooms don't look like the rest of Glitch City. Even with the matching uniforms, which can be helped since it's for the job, and the hair color, which might just be a trick of the lighting, the similarities aren't even skin deep. From what we know, thanks to Dana's background checks, Gil's had his time among the police force in Hong Kong before having to flee after being caught stealing supplies. I think back to that whenever he's getting owned, because for whatever the hell happened to him back then, he still is just another vulnerable human, especially to pile drivers. Though, it was this vulnerable human that helped highlight who Jill was as a person. For all the embarrassing moments you witness happen to Gil, there's one more for Jill that the player gets a front row seat to. Besides seeing Jill break down for the nth time to the mention of bad touches, there's actually quite a lot that goes down during the 3 weeks we're with her. The hostage crisis at Apollo Bank, Valhalla's eventual closing, a brain in a jar rolling on in. I could go on. Thinking about it though, dividing these events by their perceived relevance to Jill's life would be shrouding how they in fact all tug on each other. Many of her clients and friends are also affected by these events, some of them life-changing. Taking Say's experience as an example, the person that went into that bank wasn't the same one that came out. The scars both inside and out were plain to see, even if what exactly made them was never clear. Yet in the confusion and pain, she still found her way to making that first step. Nothing grand like a triumphant realization, but it was something. That's one thing that makes life so absurd. Many times the way narratives appear, especially in movies and novels, is that a lone protagonist learns something new, or is able to gain something that can vanquish the dilemma or villain present in a sweeping moment of truth. It doesn't actually end up working out that way, right? The changes we see in life might have had their catalysts, with no accompanying fanfare or long shots into the horizon. Maybe one day, you'd swore off smoking, and so crumpled up your last pack, counted the amount of red cars ahead during your commute as a replacement, then used the extra 10 minutes you would have had with a cigarette in your hand by taking an extra lap outside your workplace and fighting a new tree. First the minutes felt like months, but day after day you kept at it. All of a sudden it's been a year. Crazy, isn't it? Time, space, the entire world starts from you. It's not as if it's controlled or unveiled, but through perceiving and acting according to your world, quite a few things start to line up. Seeing life stories as the intricate, nonsensical messes they actually are is the first thing to do before there's any hope of running anything close to a narrative through them. But that's where the fun starts. As you're sprinting to that subway door to get to the daily wage slavery, a friendly blob might split from the larger blob inside to keep the door open for you. Other than a glance and nod to both acknowledge and thank the blob, you're on your way back to your own life. The blob does the same. But in the same vein, you're a blob that needed a quick hand getting through some doors. Different perspectives, surprisingly almost the same vision. Extend that thought to the 7 billion pairs of eyes on this earth, and it becomes clear that as you're the protagonist of your own play, you're a background character to someone else's, and both are just as important. If nothing else, let that be the game's takeaway. If the creative drink names, talking dogs, or waifus don't do it for you, then at least it's got one hell of a message. And considering how little of a difference there is to Glitch City and the world as of now, when you really break it down, Jill's struggle really is all of ours. For around $15 or less, all of that's yours, so please, if this is a game that you've been sitting on for a while, go ahead and give it a chance. I was in the exact same spot, so I get it. But if you do, don't forget the Karmatrin.